Hi Troop 1910. I'm out in my backyard here. I'm going to go through some of our knot requirements today. So the equipment that I have for this video is the yellow rope. I also have a separate rope that I'm going to use just a little bit later in the video for showing the sheet bend. I need a separate rope for that. You could use the other end of the same rope, but I like to show it with a different rope because it's a little bit easier to see, plus it's a little bit more realistic to what you would do with a sheet bend. I also have a pack of matches. You could also use a lighter, and I have my scout knife here, and a couple of poles. They don't have to be metal poles. It can be any tree or small stick or something like that to tie off to. A lot of the knots that we're going to do today have to do with tying off to a pole or tightening around a pole, and so I have a couple of poles here to show you. So the requirements that we're going to do today is for scout rank, it's going to be 4A and part of 4B. I'll get to that in a little bit. For tenderfoot requirements, it's going to be 3A, 3B, and 3C. For second class requirements, it's going to be 2F and 2G. And then in another video I'll put out later, I'll be using natural rope for all the lashings that are part of first class requirements, 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D. And I'll also show the other part of 4B because you have to have natural rope for that, for the whipping. So let me get right into it. So 4A is square knot. And so square knot is our simplest knot. It's pretty useful. It gets used for lots of things that it shouldn't get used for. Basically, it's used for tying things together, tying around a package, tying two logs together, anything you want to kind of squish together and hold that shape for a long time, like a package. If I was out in the woods and I wanted to tie two trees together, I'd probably use lashings. But if I just wanted to do it real quick and I just wanted them to hold for a little while, I might use square. So I'm going to pretend my legs are logs here, and I'm going to use my yellow rope for this. So I have my two ends, and the thing to remember about square knot is that people say right over left, left over right. But the trick to it is to understand that the same rope is going over both times, okay? So this is my, I'll do this opposite so you can see it. So this is my right, all right? We'll call that our right because you can see it on my right side. It's gonna go over the other one. So from my angle, I went over the other one, all right? I went over the rope, and then I just pull it through this loop. It's just like starting our shoelaces, and I wanna pull that tight, all right? Now, which one's my left hand? This one is, right? But it's the same rope that I did earlier when I went over. So it's the same rope is gonna go over our other rope and then get pulled through and get cinched tight, okay? So the thing that you're probably gonna see that gets messed up with a square knot most often is that people go the same direction. They'll go, right over left, and you end up with what's called a granny knot, and it's really unsafe knot. Doesn't hold very well. It tends to, when you put some pressure on it, tends to just kind of unwind itself and want to pull apart. Square knot really is going to hold. Now you can see that I didn't get this super tight, and that's part of the problem with a square knot. It's not adjustable. Once you've tied it at that distance, that's the distance it's always going to be. There's no way to make it tighter after you've tied it. All right. You have to tie it tight to begin with. One of the things that you'll see about a square knot is if you grab the railroad tracks, I call these the railroad tracks, the parallel pieces on both sides. If I grab those two and I pinch them and then I push toward the center, I can just untie that knot right there. See that? It just kind of pushes together and unties. It's the easiest way to untie a square knot. So if I want to make it a little tighter, let me do it again. I'm going to go right over left, pulling that one through, looping it through. Now I'm going to see if I can keep this together when I go left over right, pull it through. It's so hard to keep it tight. I didn't get it real tight again. It's really hard to keep a square knot super tight, which is why sometimes you'll see somebody say, hey, can you put your finger here while I tie this second knot? Now you end up tying a person's finger in there, but it's really one of the best ways to get a square knot really, really tight. So again, my railroad tracks, to see if I did it right, I push my railroad tracks together. Kind of comes untied like that. Yeah. All right, so that's our square knot. It's for tying things together, holding things in a bundle. The second one is our 2 half hitches, and I'm going to show you this on this pole here. I'm just going to get this a little bit closer to you. All right, 2 half hitches is a knot that's used for tying off to a pole or to a tree, okay? Tying something off to it. What we have to understand is that with our rope, once we've gone around a pole, we end up with a standing end. So I'm just going to throw that off to the side. It could be 100 miles long. It doesn't really matter. All right. We have our standing end, that's the really long end, and our working end, the really short end that just went around the tree. All right. So with this knot, what you want to do is you want to go over the standing end and come back through the little loop that you made. Now, the mistake that people make is they go off to the wrong side. Once they've done this, they go over again. And so essentially I've gone around my standing end twice. I only want to go around my standing end once. Not 1.5 times, but just once. All right? So let me show you that part again, because that's the part that people have most trouble with. See my working end over here? That's where it's always going to come back to this side. Okay, so I go over and through. And do you see how I come back over here? Yep, that makes sure I only do 1 loop, not 1.5, all right? Now I'm gonna go over again and through, and I wanna come back out toward my working side again, not 1.5, but always just 1, and then I tighten it, and I can slide it right up against that pole, and that's never gonna come off of there, all right? If you wanted to, people say 2 half hitches. You could do 10 half hitches if you wanted to. You could just keep working your way along. In fact, if you try it sometime and work like 8 or 10 half hitches down here, it kind of makes a little cool spiral pattern because it kind of twists as it goes. So try it sometime. But that's your 2 half hitches. Over and through, back to your working side. And then over and through again, back to your working side. Always back to the working side, all right? Working side meaning the side that the working rope started on, okay? So once again, my working side started on this side of the rope, over and through, back to my working side, over and through. If it was under and through the second time, then it wouldn't be 2 half hitches. 2 half hitches literally means the same thing twice. A half hitch, and then exactly the same thing, a half hitch again. All right, tighten it up against the rope. All right, the third one that we're gonna cover today is our taut line hitch. All right, a taut line hitch is going to be, taut line hitch is almost like 2 half hitches, except it's adjustable. And I'll show you why in a little while, why it would be adjustable. So it starts the same way. I got my standing end way over here, my working end over here. I'm gonna go across, I'm gonna go over again and through, but don't pull it tight. I'm gonna go over and through that same loop again. So I've gone twice around that first rope there. You got that? So then I want to start to pull this tight, and I want to make sure I have enough slack in this. All right, I didn't give myself enough slack. That's what happens with when you practice 2 half hitches and then you practice taut line hitch. So we have to have a little bit more of a working end. So I'm going to go over and through, back to my working side, over the same rope again and through. So you're spiraling around that same rope, so you end up with this little spiral organization right here. You see how it went twice around? I'm still back over my working side though, right? I always come back to my working side, right? The last one is going to be over again, from the working side, over and through. So that's basically a half hitch at the end, all right? I end up with a knot that looks like that, all right? Now, as I tighten it against the pole, all right, the knot will start to get a little bit tighter, all right? And the nice thing about this one is it's adjustable. So I can pull the knot, I can pull the standing end through the knot like this. And if I pull on that standing end, it's not gonna slide back this way. My 2 half hitches, if I pull on that, that whole knot will slide up against that pole. So it's not really adjustable. It's always gonna be that same length away from the pole. I'll show you how we use that in just a minute. So now we have our 2 half hitches and our taut line hitch. Let's go ahead to second class. Sorry, that was Scout 4A, square knot, 2 half hitches, and a taut line hitch. If we scoot ahead to 4B, I'll do that real quick. I don't know if you noticed, but as I was working with this rope, one end looked pretty good, and the other end looked pretty horrible. It's starting to get all frayed, right? And this is what happens to ropes. Now this is not a natural cordage. This is a polyester rope. Synthetic rope, and so in order for me to fuse the end of this so it's a little bit easier to work with and it doesn't get all frayed like this, I need to take either a match or a lighter and just heat up the end of it. So let me see if I can do this without so that you can see it and I don't burn myself. So I want to make sure I keep my hands away from this. The worst part of this is after you melt it, don't grab onto it, because it's still, even after it's not on fire anymore, it's still going to be hot for a little while. So all right, so it's kind of melted. I can see that if it's still shiny, it means it's probably still melted, right? It's still melted. I have to make sure that I let this cool off before I'm going to touch that. What do you think? You think it's safe to touch now? Whenever I think it's safe to touch, I always give it 10 more seconds. All right, so I don't need it for a little while. Ooh, I want to touch it. I want to touch it super bad. Oh, it was okay. All right, so so that was our fusing from 4B. I'll cover whipping, which is a little bit more complicated in my next video, which has lashings. So we're going to get right into our practical use of a square knot. We already did that really with our legs. It's tying any two things together, so we won't have to do that. Practical use of 2 half hitches and a taut line hitch. All right, so I need to find a new spot for my pole here, because I don't want it to come out of the ground. All right, so my 2 half hitches I'm going to do over on this pole right here. Maybe I'll do it over here. All right, so I got my working side, right? This is my working end. I'm going to do all the work with them. I'm going to go over and through, over again and through. There's my 2 half hitches. So I'm tied off to this pole, right? It's not going to go anywhere, right? If I want to come across to another pole and I do 2 half hitches, I go over and through, over and through, and I tie my half hitch to my 2 half hitches there. It's like, uh-oh. It's probably not what I want, right? If I was using this for a clothesline, or I was using to hold something up, I don't have any way to adjust this, right? I don't have any way to make it tight. I have to retie the knot, and it's probably never ever going to be really tight. So instead, I'm going to use my taut line hitch over here on this second pole. So I use 2 half hitches there. That's never going to move, and I do my taut line hitch. I went over and through, so it's 2 times around the first time. Went back to my working side, over and through, and I pull the knot nice and tight. I try to get all the windings in the knot nice and tight. All right, now I have but it did the same thing, right? Huh. Unless I grab the knot and I slide the standing end through it. Look, I can slide the standing end through this. And even if I put a bunch of tension on, that's not going to slide back over there. If I did it with 2 half hitches and I slid it like that, it would just slide back every time I put some tension on it. But I can put a lot of tension on that. Pull these poles apart. All right, you could see that it slid a little bit, right? So I got to get that knot a little bit tighter. And I could always add some more half hitches at the end, because remember, the taut line hitch ends with a half hitch, doesn't it? Sometimes a slippery rope like this synthetic rope, it'll start to slide on us, right? So I want to see if I can get that to slide now. Put a couple more half hitches on it. Now it's really on there. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay nice and tight on there. All right, so that's our practical use of 2 half hitches and a taut line hitch. It's to tighten ropes together. Now we have our second class. Uh-oh, now I got to get this undone. Second class, 2F is our sheet bend. So I'll just pull this off of here. Now a sheet bend is for tying ropes together. So if I imagine that my rope is only this long, all right? My rope's only this long. And you can see both ends. I still have that little knot tied in there. I only have this much rope. If I wanted to tie off to something much longer than that, I would need a second rope, wouldn't I? So in order to tie this, it's a little bit like a square knot, but not exactly. So don't use a square knot for this purpose, all right? So what we want to do for this is we want to have our thicker rope. That's our thicker rope, and this is our thinner rope right here. I want to use my thicker rope and just put a bite in it, like this. A bite means a loop near the end of the rope. They don't cross. They don't cross like this. A bite just literally means a loop, and it kind of comes back to itself, all right? A loop like that. Now I'm going to put the loop flat, like this. I'm going to take my other rope and I'm going to come up through the head of that thing. I'm going to go around the neck. The neck is this part where the loop kind of comes back together. I'm going to go around the neck, and then I'm going to come back under itself, not back down through the loop, but back under itself. Once I've gone around the neck once, I look for my rope that went through the head. I'm going to come back under itself, come out the other side, and then as I pull these two, I end up with those ropes tied together. And so instead of having a rope that's this long, now I have a rope that's this long, right? Because I've taken my two ropes and I've put them together. So the practical use of this is really just if you have a whole bunch of short segments of a rope and you need something longer to reach from tree to tree, or from your tarp to the ground, or from your tarp to a tree, whatever it is that you're tying up, if you need a longer section of rope but you don't have it, take two ropes, tie them together using your sheet bend. All right? That's a bite. You come up through the head, around the neck, under itself, not back down through the head. If you go back down through the head, you'll probably end up tying either a square knot or a thief's knot, which is really not a good knot to use for that. Up through the head, around the neck, and back under itself. And the smaller rope should always stick off to the side like that. You can see, even if I pull it like this, you can see how it doesn't want to go flat like that. It kind of wants to stick out to the side, right? The other one wants to lay flat. The one that had the bite in it wants to lay flat, but this one wants to stick off to the side. So that's our sheet bend. And the last one I'm going to cover in this video today is our bowline, or bowline, or bowline, however you want to say it. All right, bowline is a great knot. I read somewhere it's called the king of all knots. I don't know. There's lots of good knots in the world though. So I'm going to take this and just throw it over my shoulder. All right, because that's my standing end. It can be 100 miles long. It doesn't really matter. That's the truth with standing ends, is that they can be really long and it won't matter. So with this end right here, what we're going to do is we're going to turn a loop in the rope a little ways up from the end. And when I say a little ways, I mean a couple of feet up from the end. So it's not right near the end. It's a couple feet up from the end. We're going to turn a loop in it. So I turn my hand kind of extremely this way, and then I end up turning a loop in it. So now I have this loop like this, okay? I still have my working end way down here. My standing end's over my shoulder. I don't need it, right? So I have this loop, and it kind of looks like a little hole in the ground, all right? So what's going to happen is this rabbit, people use this analogy all the time with the bowline, the rabbit is going to come up through the hole, around the tree. The tree is the standing end, the one that's going over my shoulder. So I'm going to go around the tree, and it's going to go back down through the hole. See how I didn't pull this part, though? See how I didn't pull the slack out of it? A slack in a knot or a rope is the part that is still loose, all right? So I'm going to give myself a little bit more rope to do this with, because I didn't like how much slack I had. I couldn't really show the knot so good. I have my loop in here. See how long this end is? So I'm going to take my rabbit. I'm going to go up through the hole, around the tree, back down through the hole. I still have all this slack down here, though, right? Still have all that slack down there. When I come back through the thing, don't keep pulling. Don't pull all the slack out. The slack is going to be your loop. That's going to be your bowline. So once I've come back down through the hole, I'm going to grab onto the part of that loop. I'm going to put this rabbit right up against one of these ropes and squeeze them together. And then as I pull the standing end to tighten this rope, it's going to end up pulling that knot right into place. And we end up with a knot like this. And it's going to be a consistent loop, meaning that's never going to change size. Once I've tied this, I can't make this loop bigger. I can't make it smaller. People think of it like as a noose. It is not. A noose is particularly a knot that will slide. All right. This is not like that. This is a safety. This is a safety rope. Because if I threw this over the side of a ledge to somebody or something like that, it wouldn't change shape. So somebody could grab onto this, put it through their wrist or put it around their body, and then as I pull up on it, it's not going to cinch down and get smaller and squish whatever this person's arm or their body or whatever it is. It's always going to stay that same width. So it's a good knot for safety stuff. It's a good knot if I wanted to throw it over a pole and have it something where I could easily take it back off. You know, the reason it's called a bowline is because sailors would use this at this front of the ship, the bow of the ship, and that's where it got its name from, the bow line. They would have a knot like this tied in a big rope, and then they would throw this onto the shore, and one of the sailors on the shore would loop this around the first mooring, the first one of those big yellow things that you see on the boat docks. Just throw this around here real quick, and then they could pull the rest of the boat back and pull that tight like that. So that's not adjustable. The other one that they would tie would be adjustable. You wouldn't have two bowlines because then nothing's adjustable and the boat could just shift around wherever it wanted. So you throw this on, and then you would have to pull the boat backward against it to put any tension on it, so, because that's never going to change size or shape. All right, so that kind of gets us through some of our requirements. I know it's a long video, but it's a lot of knots. So practice those. If you do a knot 3 times, you haven't done it enough. If you do it 10 times, you haven't done it enough. I've tied each one of these knots probably 1,000 times, and so that's why I know them so well, and you won't know them really well until you tie them hundreds of times. All right? Bye, 1910. Have a good day.